Ukrainian drone attack on the Kremlin. U.S. Fed quarter point raise signals a possible pause. Taiwan seeking U.S. cooperation to make next-generation fighters. 3 imprisoned Iranian female journalists win top UN prize. The ISS will end its life in 2031 in the Pacific Ocean. Ukrainian farmer has novel way to demine his fields. Australia to ban recreational vaping. 5 in 100 young men in England have high blood pressure.
Hello, I'm Johnny. Thank you for joining us on Funday News. It's Thursday, May 4th, and here are your top stories. The Kremlin claimed on Wednesday that Ukraine had launched a drone strike at President Vladimir Putin's residence overnight. The 2 drones were disabled by state security services, and Mr. Putin was uninjured. The New York Times reported it was not immediately possible to verify the Russian claim, and a Ukrainian official said Kyiv had no information about the so-called night attacks on the Kremlin. The Kremlin said it regards these actions as planned terrorist attack and an attempt on the president.
In a statement, the Kremlin said the military and special services had disabled the drones, causing some debris to scatter on the Kremlin grounds. It said Mr. Putin was not in the Kremlin at the time of the incident. According to his spokesman, Dmitry S. Peskov, there were no casualties. The New York Times said if confirmed, it would be the boldest attempted strike on Russian soil since Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February last year.
The U.S. Federal Reserve raised interest rates by a 0.25 percentage point and hinted it may be the final move in the most aggressive tightening campaign since the 1980s. The U.S. Federal Open Market Committee said in a statement Wednesday the committee will closely monitor incoming information and assess the implications for monetary policy. However, the statement omitted a line from its previous statement in March, and it hinted that the policy would have a change.
The omitted line was a March statement saying the U.S. Fed anticipates that some additional policy firming may be appropriate. Instead, the FOMC will take into account various factors in determining the extent to which additional policy firming may be appropriate. When asked whether the statement is a signal that officials are prepared to pause rate increases in June, Chair Jerome Powell said, "That's a meaningful change that we're no longer saying that we anticipate further increases."
Chairman of the Taiwanese defense contractor Aerospace Industrial Development Corp., Hu Kai-han, said on Wednesday that the company wanted to raise its technical prowess to help with the development of Taiwan's next-generation fighter jets. He said, when it comes to the development of the next-generation fighter, we hope the U.S. supports Taiwan to develop it itself, including the engine, avionics, control systems, environmental controls, and so on, which are all an opportunity for Taiwan-U.S. cooperation.
Taiwan's Air Force scrambles daily to see off incursions by Chinese jets into the airspace around the island. Taiwan has no direct answer to China's new J-20 stealth fighter. In 2017, Taiwan announced the next-generation fighter program to include stealth capabilities, but has given few details since. For now, the mainstay of Taiwan's Air Force is Lockheed Martin Corp's F-16s and French-built Mirages. Taiwan also uses AIDC's FCK-1 Sheng Kuo indigenous defense fighters.
The United Nations announced Tuesday night that its premier prize for press freedom has been awarded to 3 imprisoned Iranian female journalists. The winners are Niloufar Hamadi, who broke the news that 22-year-old Masha Amini died last September while being held by the morality police for wearing her headscarf too loosely, and Ilahe Mamadi, who wrote about her funeral. The third winner is Nargis Mamadi, who has worked for many years as a journalist and is one of Iran's most prominent activists.
That's appalling, and it's a gut punch.
UNESCO Director General Audrey Azoulay announced the winners at a ceremony in New York, saying, "Now more than ever, it is important to pay tribute to all women journalists who are prevented from doing their jobs and who face threats and attacks on their personal safety." Chair of the International Jury of Media Professionals that chose the winners, Zainab Salbi, said the brave work of the 3 winners led to a historical women-led revolution.
I always needed time on my own. I never thought I'd be here.
I take your blessings with your heartaches too. So 学习，一切从今天开始。Funday 英语。
The International Space Station, ISS, has been orbiting the Earth since construction on it began in 1998. It has hosted more than 250 visitors from 20 countries since its first crew arrived in November 2000. But much of its hardware is decades old, which could eventually see the station become dangerous or even uncontrollable in orbit. To prevent a catastrophe in space from happening, the space station will be deorbited in 2031, bringing it through the atmosphere to safely splash down in the Pacific Ocean.
Last month, NASA asked Congress for funding to start the development of a space tug to perform the task, a spacecraft that can push the station back into the atmosphere. It was estimated the tug vehicle would cost just shy of $1 billion. The lifetime of the ISS has been extended several times, but it's widely agreed that extending it beyond 2030 would be risky. Events will begin in 2026, when the orbit of the ISS will be allowed to naturally decay under atmospheric drag, dropping from 400 kilometers to about 320 kilometers in mid-2030.
A Ukrainian farmer has come up with a novel way to remove mice left in his fields after Russia's invasion. Alexander Krysov designed a remote-controlled tractor that could withstand blasts. Using armor from damaged Russian military vehicles to protect the body of his tractor, he bought a system that would enable one of his team to operate the tractor remotely from a digger's bucket suspended in the air nearby. He said he couldn't wait for help from overworked official deminers to clear his field.
Наїхали на протитанкову міну, і от вибило.
Krasov told Reuters, "We started doing this just because the crop sowing time has come and we can't do anything because the rescue services are very busy." He said, "We ran over an anti-tank mine. The protection got blown out, but the tractor is safe, everyone's alive and safe." The equipment was restored and repaired. Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal said last week about 30% of Ukrainian territory had been mined by Russians. The demining unit said, it would take years to demine this particular field.
Recreational vaping will be banned in Australia as part of a major crackdown amid what experts say is an epidemic. Minimum quality standards will also be introduced, with the sale of vapes restricted to pharmacies. The Australian government says they are a public health threat, disproportionately affecting young people, many of whom haven't smoked before. Research suggests that 1 in 6 Australians aged 14 to 17 years old has vaped, and 1 in 4 people aged 18 to 24.
Nicotine vapes already require a prescription in Australia, but the industry is poorly regulated and a black market is thriving. Health experts advise that vapes are not risk-free, they can often contain chemicals, and the long-term implications of using them are not yet clear. The Australian Health Minister said the federal government would work with state and territory governments on potential penalties for possession of e-cigarettes unless they had been prescribed. A timeline for implementation will be announced at a later date.
The UK's Office for National Statistics said about 170,000 aged 16 to 24 in England unknowingly have risky high blood pressure. That is about 5 in 100 young men and 1 in 100 young women. The ONS carried out a new analysis to identify the groups most at risk of having undiagnosed high blood pressure. The agency said the sooner hypertension, one of the most common causes of premature death, is identified, the more effectively it can be managed and treated among old ages.
High blood pressure, or hypertension, is responsible for about half the heart attacks and strokes in the UK. Although it may not cause symptoms or problems to begin with, it puts extra strain on the heart and blood vessels. Being overweight, eating an unhealthy diet, not being active, drinking too much alcohol and smoking can all raise blood pressure. According to the ONS, young men were particularly likely to be undiagnosed, 66% of males and 26% of females aged 16 to 24 years.
Now let's take a look at the vocabulary of the news of banning recreational vaping. Number 1, crackdown, 严厉的打击，镇压。Facing the current corruption situation, nations have increased the crackdown. Number 2, thrive, 兴旺发达，繁荣。New businesses thrive in this area. Number 3, implication, 可能的影响或作用，结果，常用复数。The development of the site will have implications for the surrounding countryside. And that's all for today's Funday News. Be sure to tune in to Funday News from Monday to Friday and click the link below to join Funday for free. I'm Johnny Wu, your host. I'll see you next time.